Cops of Reddit, what famous people have you pulled over, and how did it go down? My dad pulled over Clint Eastwood. I guess this was just after they started requiring licenses to drive motorcycles in California. He pulled him over because he was driving squirrely, like he didn't really know how to ride. His response to license issue was, man, next thing you know you'll need a license to ride a horse. Not a police officer, but I was a New York City park ranger in Central Park. I asked Christian Amanpour from CNN to put her dog on a leash, and she said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "I don't care who you are, put your dog on a leash." My father was a police officer for 27 years, and in one day he pulled over Paul Newman, who, apparently, was notorious for speeding. So, my dad goes to cite him, and gets a call for an accident that needed assistance down the road. Then sometime shortly thereafter, my father pulled him over again, and Newman allegedly groaned, "Not you again." Not a cop, but I was working as a lifeguard, and we had the beach red flagged, no swimming, for rough surf. There was this girl swimming, so I hopped on my ATV and headed down, to call her out of the water. Her swimming was weird. I couldn't put my finger on it right away. Part of determining whether or not I have to rescue someone is to evaluate their swimming stroke. She wasn't in obvious distress, just swimming around in her weird sort of way. I blow my whistle to get her attention, and she starts swimming back to shore. At this point I should probably mention that we had a surf contest going on and there were a bunch of pro surfers in town because of it. She walks out the water, and at this point I realize why her swim stroke was weird. She only has one arm. Now I've got to tell Bethany Hamilton that the water is too rough for swimming. I used to live in Bergenfield, New Jersey a few years back, and I think Chris Rock lives there. Or Englewood, somewhere in Bergen County. My buddy was a Teaneck cop, and said he pulled him over for going 55 in a 30 and NJ is mad strict with driving. He said Chris was awesome and even gave him an autograph after the speeding ticket. Former police cadet and dispatcher here. I was on a ride along, and was told this story. So this officer pulls this car over for speeding. She then suspects the driver of being drunk. She calls in his driver's license to run it. The dispatcher tells her, "You have Nick Nolte pulled over? Do you know who he is? He's a movie star." The officer is young and doesn't know who Nick Nolte is. Turns out he wasn't drunk. He was just being Nick Nolte. She gave him a warning and sent him on his way. Some police officer pulled over Kit Harington once for speeding or something. He said he'd let him go if he told him if he's really dead in Game of Thrones. He told him. He let him go. True story, at least according to Kit. My dad was a cop. Pulled over none other than Marilyn Manson for an unsafe signal lane change. He was bragging the day it happened, in the early 2000s. Said he was nondescript and low-key, apologetic and didn't act like a big shot above the law. Not exactly what you're looking for, but relatable. My father was a repo man for a short time in Newark, NJ. He ended up getting a call to put a car on the hook for unpaid bills. As he put the car on the hook, a man started running out to the street shouting, "Hey man, that's my car. Don't you know who I am?" My father had no idea. The man then proceeded to tell my father that he's Redman. My father responded, "Yeah, well, I'm white man. Next time pay your bill," and drove off with the car. This is from Lewis Hamilton in his interview in Letterman. He drove a particularly loud sports car in London and was promptly pulled over by a cop that told him as he approached Lewis's window, "Who do you think you are, Lewis Hamilton?" He didn't get a ticket. I wasn't a patrol officer, but rather the sheriff's deputy at Aspen's Airport, Sardie Field. I had to threaten to tow both Kurt Russell's and Hunter Thompson's vehicles more than once when they left them where they weren't supposed to, parked right in front of the airport. Hunter was Hunter and just mumbled and groused, and Kurt usually just waved and smiled. Dirty violators, the both of them. I met and spoke with a lot of celebrities when I was a cop, as our jurisdiction covered a prominent nightlife spot and casino. Never pulled one over, but met quite a few. The most memorable was Rick Ross. I had a racist old piece of shit lieutenant. We were in the middle of an initiative to ID and otherwise remove a growing presence of 9 tree bloods. This meant approaching a lot of black individuals if they met the general description: sagging pants, face tats, Cincy Reds hat. The area banned bandanas and they started using the red hats to fly their colors. We would ID them, tell them they were not welcome dressed the way they were, so they could pull up their pants, take off the hat, and stay, or they could leave entirely. My partner and I recognized Rick Ross. He was with someone, and they were just enjoying a frozen cocktail. My LT comes up and tells us we need to ID those 2 blacks. We are not about that. We tell him we know who that is. He's a successful rapper. We are not gonna harass him. Long story short, we were ordered and did as ordered, but I made it no secret to him while asking for his ID that we knew who he was, we enjoyed some of his music, and that we didn't want to harass him, but the one racist fart made us ID him. He was cool about it. With my partner and I still feel bad about having to harass him like that. Dude was legit just chilling. He said fuck that place and left immediately after. Smug ass LT came by smiling that he knew there was something wrong with the motherfucker. He had 8k in his pockets. You ain't shit to him, lol. Sam Elliott has a ranch just outside of Brownsville, Oregon, which is just off to the left of nowhere. A buddy of mine is a deputy for the county and has run into him in the store buying milk or whatever. One of my buddy's coworkers had to go out to the ranch to take a report when Mrs. Elliott got bit by a dog or something. The next day, my friend pulled them over without realizing who it was initially until he ran the plate. When he went up, he greeted them and asked how she was doing, and she was all, "Oh, that's so nice of you to ask. Everybody always wants to talk to my husband, like he's some movie star or something." I guess she wrote a letter to the sheriff about how thoughtful it was of him to ask, and what a nice young man he was. Only local politicians. They've all been assholes and expected me to just let them go regardless of why I stopped them. Some got warnings, some got tickets, one got arrested because she was drunk. I treated them just like I treat everyone else. Some of my coworkers got pissed about the arrest because she was on the county council and they vote on our pay raises, but DUI is DUI. I'd rather piss off a council member and miss out on a raise than let some drunk go and find out later they hit and killed someone. Not a cop, but when I was in my teens in about 1992 I took a night college course with an armed response officer. He told me loads of stories about celebs, but one in particular about George Michael. The officer had found 2 empty cars in a motorway lay-by, and as he investigated, 2 men came out of the brush after an obvious sexual encounter. The officer advised them not to leave their cars and attended. George's was an expensive Range Rover, and left them be. This was about 5 years before George actually came out. As the officer and I are both from George's hometown, he had kept the secret and not told anyone until then. We'd been discussing George's music and were both fans. My dad pulled over Anthony Kiedis and Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers out in the California desert once. They had some girls with them. God only knows what they were doing or where they were going. His partner was actually the one to pull them over, but by chance, he got a glimpse of them. He ran up, confirmed it was them, had a laugh, and convinced his partner to let them go. I think I was only a kid when I heard this story. Epstein. He even showed me his solid gold license plate and showed me the cage of kids he had in the back. After I told him to get his headlight fixed, he thanked me before driving off, saying something about how he was not off to kill himself as he got in. I was always confused about the last part until recently.
I'm gay.